Nirmala Rajasingham joins us now here in our Firehouse studio. Welcome to Democracy Now! Explain the situation right now and what you think needs to happen.
Well, there is a very serious humanitarian catastrophe right now in the north of Sri Lanka, and basically both parties, the government and the LTTE, are guilty of war crimes. And there are huge casualties, deaths, and tremendous suffering. And we have now concentrating on, on the casualties and the conflagration right now. But this civilian population has been dragged around by the LTTE as they retreated, and they have been suffering tremendous hardship for a few months now. And the situation is very dire, and SLDF is calling upon greater scrutiny on the situation by the UN and all its agencies, such as the UNHCR, the Human Rights Council, and even the Security Council, to find a way out for these civilians at this point.
Well, some human rights groups in India and other places have even labeled what's going on there as a genocide. Would you agree with that level of a critique of the situation?
I think the terminology genocide is unhelpful for the reason that what they are alleging as the Sri Lankan government is committing genocide against the Tamil people. As you are aware, for the last 3 years, Sri Lanka, the number of abductions, extrajudicial killings, and disappearances amongst the Tamil population by government forces and armed groups linked to them has been very high. Sri Lanka is has one of the highest records of abductions and disappearances. So the government is guilty of horrible human rights abuses against the Tamil minority, and there is no need for us to resort to such unhelpful terminology when the government's record is all there for us to see. And here also the civilians are affected by both warring parties. It is not just the government that is killing the civilians. The aerial bombing and shelling, of course, is resulting in very large number of casualties. But the LTT, the trapped civilians, are also not being allowed to leave the LTT-controlled areas. We have credible reports, well-documented, published reports that the LTT is shooting at civilians trying to flee. They are carrying on forcible conscription of children in the war zones, and the government, of course, shows callous disregard and carries on its indiscriminate violence, which is,
Nirmala, for people who are not familiar with the situation at all, if you can give us a brief history, but as illustrated by your own situation, your own family, your own sister. You were a Tamil Tiger. What does that even mean?
Well, since independence,
which was in
1948, there have been a whole series of discriminatory legislations introduced by successive Sri Lankan governments against the minorities, and particularly also against the Tamil minority. And what has happened is there has been a majoritarian state was established, and this state was always dominated by various, to varying degrees, depending on the government, by singular Buddhist nationalist forces. And of course the Tamil minority parties and other minorities also tried to negotiate over many years and make deals with this majoritarian state.
And what proportion of the population is Tamil?
Well, we have I think, as far as ethnic minorities are concerned, there are 3 distinct minorities. The Sri Lankan Tamil minority, which is 12%, and Muslims who are also Tamil speaking, largely about 7 to 8%, and hill country plantation Tamils who were brought there by the British to work on the plantations as indentured labor, who are by the way, in 1948, one of the first pieces of legislation of the majoritarian state was to disenfranchise these Indian plantation labor. So many of them have been repatriated back to India, and now their numbers are depleted. So they are, I think, 5 to 6%. So basically, these are the 3 minorities, distinct minorities, and they've all suffered under this majoritarian state. And in addition to these discriminatory legislation. It has also, whenever the Tamils try to challenge this, the state has responded with, government-instigated pogroms against Tamils, violence. And in the late 70s, people like me, who were very much not in favor of a Tamil nationalist cause, had no choice but were pushed into supporting groups such as the LTTE, because the government also began to militarize the north and east, where Tamils predominantly live, and unleash a wave of repression. They introduced the Prevention of Terrorism Act, which targeted Tamil youth, etc. So, of course, Tamil militancy grew, and the 1983 pogroms were the worst. And after that, the ranks of the militant movement swelled. But of course, I was one of the few survivors of the Velikada prison massacre. I was in prison at that time in 1983. Tamil political prisoners were murdered in their cells and in their in the prisons, in a government-engineered massacre. But anyway, I, of course, also, came into serious disagreement with the LTTE, who I supported, because of their own internal abuses, they also wiped out many other, the other Tamil militant groups, decimated them, and tried to establish themselves as the sole, what they call the sole representatives of the Tamil people. So they are deeply undemocratic.
And what happened to your sister?
My sister was Dr. Rajanithi Ranagama. She was a prominent human rights activist. She was a founder member of the University Teachers for Human Rights, which to this day continues to report human rights violations by all parties from living in the underground. She was murdered by the LTTE, the Tamil Tigers, in 1989 for speaking out against human rights abuses. She was critical of all the armed groups and the governments and the Indian peacekeeping force, but the Tigers murdered her. So, of course, I have lived in exile, and there is a growing dissenting Tamil community in the diaspora in the West, which has challenged the LTTE's sole representation bid. But now, of course, militarily, the LTTE, as we all know, has been significantly weakened. We wait to see what the Sri Lankan government, the current government, is going to do. And one of the serious problems is, of course, the war and the humanitarian crisis. The catastrophe is one huge problem that we have to deal with. But at the heart of government, the current government has brought Sinhala Buddhist nationalist forces, which had been sidelined by previous governments, back to center stage, and they have now come to dominate the mainstream terrain of Sri Lankan politics, one. And secondly, still the majoritarian thinking prevails, and even the resolution of the humanitarian catastrophe and the subsequent, dealing with the IDPs, how the civilians are going to be treated, all of that depends on how this government is going to deal with the minorities question.
Let me ask you the role of the outside powers, the United States, England, India, in the conflict in your country.
Well, the thing is, the various governments have shown different levels of interest over the years, Sri Lanka being a small island nation, and India has always had a very strong interest, and in the early years of the militant movement, they supported the militants, which I thought, which did not produce good results, however, at the moment, India is pressurizing the Sri Lankan government to reduce civilian casualties, etc. They say that they will support the Sri Lankan government to evacuate civilians, and also India has been pressurizing the Sri Lankan government to bring about a political solution, settlement, and that is one of the crucial questions that today everyone should focus on, a democratic and inclusive political process which will bring everyone to the table and to achieve a political settlement to this conflict.
We have 20 seconds. You've come to this country, you're in exile in London, you're from Sri Lanka, the Tamil minority there. What is your message? Why America have you come here?
I mean, to the Tamil minority and to the Tamil diaspora, what my message is that we must join forces with the other minorities and construct a broad democracy movement with the support of progressive Sinhalese to challenge the majoritarian state in Sri Lanka.
I want to thank you very much to Nirmala Rajasingham for joining